Welcome to Speak for Yourself. Joy Taylor, co-host of The Herd, Slick Ric Bucher, knowledgeable about all things. But before we get into anything, the news of the day, NFL NFLPA reached a settlement. Deshaun Watson suspended for 11 games along with a $5 million fine. Before we tell you what we have to say, here's what he had to say. Take a
I've always stood on my innocence and always said that I've never assaulted anyone or disrespected anyone, and I'm continuing to stand on that. But at the same time, I have to continue to push forward with my life and my career. And for us to be able to move forward, I have to be able to take steps and put pride to the side. And I'm going to continue to stand on my innocence and keep pushing forward. And I've always, stood on not disrespecting or sexual assaulting anyone.
Finally, it appears that we are one step closer to this saga being over. I cannot wait to hear you all's reactions, particularly you, Joy. I know you've been hot on this topic. My instant reaction is this. There's one word: fair. I believe the 11-game suspension is fair. Why? Because we have gotten closer to accountability, not justice, because justice implies true restoration. And I do not believe that these women will have true restoration. I do not believe that Deshaun Watson's image will have true restoration. However, we see accountability, and accountability is one step closer towards justice. So my word that comes to mind is fair. This ruling is fair. The former judge, saw 6 games as fit. The NFL said, you know what, that does not seem to fit the mold of Deshaun Watson's actions. 11 games is fair, plus a $5 million fine. For those of you all that think $5 million is a small number, do remember that Deshaun Watson's sophomore and junior season in the National Football League, his second and third year, he made $2.8 million combined, essentially playing both of those seasons for free. 2 seasons in which the Houston Texans made the playoffs. Fair, not justice, because we will not see restoration. However, accountability, and all you can ask for from human beings, all you can ask for from the NFL, all you can ask for from Deshaun Watson at this point in time is to be held accountable. That's my instantaneous reaction. Slick Ric Bucher, where do you stand?
My first, second, and third reaction was somehow, some way, Deshaun Watson, the Cleveland Browns, and the NFL snatched a loss, an obvious, embarrassing, ugly loss, and turned it around and made it as good as they could possibly make it. Until I heard what Deshaun Watson just said. I was feeling so good about this being resolved, that it was hefty enough. It's exactly what I said last week when we talked about this subject, what Deshaun Watson should offer, which is something bigger than the 6 games, something that was a little more meaningful, something that would satisfy people and might get Roger Goodell to say, okay, that is meaningful enough to allow you to play this season and play in meaningful games, play at the end of the season. But it came with, and I saw the statement that he released, which expressed remorse and culpability. And now I get a statement at the very end. So I get all the way to the 1-yard line with a situation that I felt good about, and now I hear, not once, but twice, someone talking about his innocence. This is not the time. It is so disappointing to get to a point and have my first, second, and third reaction be, we finally resolved this.
But are you good about the ruling? Or do you feel good with the 11 games, of $5 million fine? Are you good with what the NFL and NFLPA have agreed to?
Yes, I'm good with all of that, because I like seeing that they resolved it without having to go to the arbitrator's ruling and saying it's the league and the players' union working together. Love that. I don't want to say loved because the circumstance that we're under, but I was extremely satisfied. I thought somehow they made this good. And then Deshaun Watson says what he says, and it was just like,
Joy, where do you stand?
Yeah, I agree with Rick. How I felt about this morning when the news first came out and how I feel about it now are 2 very different feelings. As far as the ruling itself, this is the best case scenario for everyone involved. Obviously, the NFL was not happy with the 6 games. I agreed based off of the precedents or lack thereof in this particular situation with the amount of women accusing Deshaun Watson. We have never seen anything to this level as far as the numbers in the NFL. So I felt that it was unprecedented based off of the report that the independent arbitrator, former Judge Sue Robinson, gave There was guilt. There was a pattern of behavior, a pattern of egregious behavior. There was lies told. So there was clearly an investigation that resulted in something happened and it was nonviolence, and this is the recommendation of games. So when you look at the situation, the NFLPA is likely not going to sue. Had that happened, this would have dragged out for another year or possibly more. And Deshaun likely would have been on the field week 1 while that process was going on, which would have been a bad situation for the NFL overall. Now we know what the ruling is. The Browns can move forward on the field. Deshaun can then begin planning the rest of his year and how he's going to approach everything. And the NFL got essentially double the number of games that was originally recommended.
And $5 million fine.
By Sue Robinson. And as far as the fine goes, I'm glad there is a fine. I know people will argue because we're talking about $230 million guaranteed, and trees don't go to the sky. It's the largest fine in NFL history for a player. $5 million, however much we throw these big numbers out, is a significant amount of money. I'm comfortable with the fine itself. I'm glad there is a fine. I do think that does make a statement as well. So overall, as far as the ruling goes, I feel this was the best case scenario for everyone involved. No one was ever going to be happy on either end anywhere in the world. No one was going to agree with the right amount of number for these games, for this suspension. So I feel that this is a comfortable resting space for the situation.
Yeah, I think that right now, at a minimum, everyone should be able to agree upon the fact that Deshaun Watson was reckless. Deshaun Watson was not careful at all whatsoever. And Deshaun Watson was predatory, at least to a degree. Even if you think that Deshaun Watson did nothing, everyone should be able to agree upon the fact that 63, 64 plus massage therapists, 17 months, roughly 3.8 massage therapists per month is reckless and dangerous. Sure. And he has to pay the stupid tax. The tax for just being unintelligent based upon your actions. Not calling him an unintelligent individual, but those actions were very unintelligent. He does indeed have to pay the stupid tax. Joy, it seemed that while Rick was speaking, you were kind of co-signing by your face the aspect of Deshaun should not have said anything today. What do you think his approach should have been publicly based upon the ruling?
Well, there's a lot that's been said, not just from Deshaun. A lot of people have spoken about this. Andrew Berry has spoken. The owner has spoken. Deshaun's agent has spoken. Deshaun has spoken. I don't think Olivia Pope could solve the situation at this point. Whenever something like this happens, and you can honestly say, and I do believe if you got a straight answer from Deshaun's camp, from Deshaun, from the Cleveland Browns owners and their coaches and organization, they have to feel comfortable with this. It's not ideal. Obviously, you would want Deshaun playing week 1 and playing the whole season from a football perspective. But you kind of got a win here. You don't have a year. This isn't dragging out another year, which could then potentially lead to a massive suspension.
Do you think, though? Because I think that's the pivotal disagreement, is that some might insinuate that Deshaun Watson and his camp and the Browns won, whereas if you asked Deshaun Watson, if you asked his camp, or if you asked the Cleveland Browns, I don't think they would feel comfortable with the statement that, like, they got off easy.
I mean, I don't know how, if you're the Browns, you could think that this was a bad situation. This could be so much worse than it is. Sometimes, whether you feel, which at this point, I don't want to get into the discussion of like what we think happened. We got a report based off of an investigation that involved 4 women, which is already a bigger number than we have ever seen in the history of the NFL. So we're not even going to go into the 25 that sued. We're not even going to go into the fact that the Texans settled with 30. Let's just focus on the 4 that Sue Robinson read the investigation from. You're already at an unprecedented number. Maybe it's not a win. Maybe there's not an appropriate word, or I don't have the word to describe the situation. But sometimes you have to take the situation for what it is. So that being said, you've prepared a statement. You've put it out. You've worked with the PR team. You've worked with your crisis management team. Let it go. I don't need any more defending. I don't need any more extras. I don't need any more this and second chances. We just got it today. Today we found out what the suspension is, hours ago. Just give it a beat before you start trying to reverse the narrative on everything that's happened.
But I would go a little stronger than that. Anybody who doesn't think, if the Browns or Deshaun Watson or his agent feel like they're taking one for the team in this circumstance, they are delusional.
I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't say he's taking one for the team, but if you maintain innocence, which Deshaun Watson has maintained innocence. I'm just simply saying I don't know if you can utter that Deshaun Watson feels like he got away with one after 11 games and $5 million.
However, I'm going based on Roger Goodell's reaction to the 6 games, which was this isn't nearly enough. We're going to have a fine, and we want him to miss the season, and based on how the NFL has operated previously. So if they're looking at through the prism of simply, well, this is what the arbitrator said and this is what we expected to get, then yes. But you're dealing with Roger Goodell in the NFL. Yeah. Now, if you're not taking that into account, then I don't know that you have a clear perspective on this. This is why I say they snatched victory from the jaws of ugliness and embarrassment. He gets to play this year, and he gets to play 6 games prior to presumably making the postseason. That's a hell of a lot more than what you were looking at realistically.
Speaking of playing, Joy, let's play it forward on the field because now the Browns realize they're without their starting quarterback, $230 million quarterback, Pro Bowl quarterback Deshaun Watson for 11 games, set to return Week 13 against the Houston Texans. What should the Browns do at the quarterback position? In my mind, if you roll Jacoby Brissett out there for 11 games, you're basically cashing the season in. Right, I think Jacoby Brissett is a solid quarterback, but I don't think slick that Jacoby Brissett can lead the Browns to the playoffs, knowing that the Ravens are in that division, knowing that Mike Tomlin is in that division, knowing that the Bengals are in that division. You got rid of Baker Mayfield, which you didn't have to do. It's already done. It's over with. There are guys like Jimmy G on the streets. What should the Browns do with the quarterback position?
I don't think they should bring in Jimmy G at this point. The Cleveland Browns clearly knew that this was a possibility when they brought Deshaun Watson in because they signed him after all of these allegations had come out. So there was no confusion about this being on the board, that they would be missing Deshaun Watson for some part of the season, possibly the entire season. Looking at the situation as it is now, if you bring in Jimmy G, what if Jimmy G is playing at a high level, which for Jimmy G is entirely possible. He could be terrible or he could be great. He could have them in the playoff run. Then you bring in Deshaun Watson, Week 13 at the Texans. He hasn't played football in almost 2 years at this point. He looked rusty the other day. Now you're talking about almost an entire season of him not practicing at all. And you have this momentum running with another quarterback that you've brought in. How can you insert Deshaun Watson into the situation? How can you insert him into the starting role? Well, you'd have to because you're paying him $230 million guaranteed. Now he goes in there rusty, loses a few games. All of this is entirely possible. I don't expect him to come in when he does Week 13 and be good. That would be insane.
So then do you think the Browns should essentially just assume this season is a sunk cost? Like, you know what? Hey, Deshaun, you ain't playing. Brissett, you're not going to play well.
Well, based off the contract that they gave him and the way that they structured it, it seems that they assumed that was on the board. So, yes, I do think you have to give the starting job to Jacoby Brissett. Deshaun cannot practice once Week 1 starts. So all the Team 1 reps should be going to Jacoby Brissett at this point. Deshaun should be getting as much action as he can, but not with the first team.
Slick?
No! Give up the season. What, because Jacoby Brissett is the quarterback? Look, Baker Mayfield wasn't going to lead them to the playoffs. Jacoby Brissett, I agree with you, is not going to lead them to the playoffs. Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, Myles Garrett, that team is going to potentially get them to the playoffs. So I never counted on Brissett being some extraordinary quarterback. Can he be functional? Can he be capable? Yes, I believe all of that. Do I believe that the Browns collectively have a playoff caliber team? Yes, I do. Kareem Hunt is past his I want to be traded thing. He's in camp. Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb, the way that team is composed. What was our disappointment with Baker Mayfield last year? Because they were supposed to be a better team than they were.
Look, you got to be realistic. You got to be realistic. And I don't mean necessarily Stephen Ross, owner of the Miami Dolphins, realistic, but realistic in the sense that you might not win a ton this year, so maybe you should start thinking forward. You're not necessarily going to say, hey, let's throw any games, but Jacoby Brissett is not taking you to the playoffs more than likely. Now, he might get you 6-5. Deshaun Watson comes back. Maybe if they run the table, you can get in. I just don't know that I anticipate this Browns team really competing in that AFC North division without Deshaun Watson for 11 weeks.
Well, that's the issue, and that's where I would push back on that, is this is not a division where you're going to be able to get away with that. And I like Kevin Stefanski, Coach of the Year, great, but you've got Mike Tomlin, you've got the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson. You've got the Cincinnati Bengals and Joe Burrow, who just played in the Super Bowl. Yeah. So you're going to have to bring something better than this. The team is on paper a playoff team.
Absolutely.
That is certain. But Baker Mayfield wasn't able to get it done, and Baker Mayfield is better than Jacoby Brissett. So I think that this is just I'm not saying tanking, but this is a punt of a season. And that was the intention of the NFL for adding extra games, that it would be punitive to the Cleveland Browns to bring Deshaun Watson in.
Look, I get the idea. I'm not saying they're a bona fide playoff team. But what I'm hearing from you guys is, let's just cash it in. This season is over. And I can't, with the talent that the Browns have and the question marks that I have about where the Ravens are and where the Pittsburgh Steelers are, I'm not ready to say the Browns can't be a wild card team at the very least.
Fair. That's fair. Optimistic, but it's fair. I look at it like this. The AFC North either has the greatest coach of the generation on the team or one of the greatest quarterbacks of the generation on the team. You're talking about Mike Tomlin, one of the greatest coaches of the generation for the Steelers. Then you got Lamar Jackson, one of the greatest quarterbacks of the generation, and Joe Burrow, who was very early starting to prove himself as one of the greatest young quarterbacks, at least, of the generation. It's going to be hard for the Cleveland Browns. Jacoby Brissett, it's your time now. Let's see what you got.